Welcome, friends. This is Into the Garden We Grow, a place for faith-filled growth. Each week we gather here to have honest conversations about life, leadership, healing, and purpose, reminding us that even in hard soil, something beautiful can grow. Wherever you're planted today, you belong here. Hi, friends. Thank you for coming back to Into the Garden We Grow. My name is Kristen, and I'm one of the hosts of the show. Alina and Kelly aren't here today, but that's okay. Today I'm going to take the opportunity to share a personal testimony of a health journey that I've had, and it has to do with my first pregnancy and the loss of my firstborn son. I hope that this message finds the person that needs to hear it, and if you're watching this and you know somebody that probably would benefit from hearing it, please share it. It's not an easy conversation to have when losing a child, losing a baby. It doesn't matter how old they are. But here's my personal testimony. When I was 20, almost 21 years old, James and I were expecting our first baby. I didn't know the gender. I didn't know what it was like to be pregnant. I didn't know anything. It was all new. It wasn't planned. It was unexpected, but I was excited. I was very happy. I've always known that I've wanted to be a mother. It's just in my DNA. And when I got to be about 5 weeks of gestational age, I was working at a restaurant at the time, and my back was starting to hurt, my lower back, and I thought, well, maybe I was just tired or hungry, and we got cut from the floor, meaning that there wasn't enough business to be able to support having more servers on the floor. And some of the friends that I had asked if I wanted to go out to eat dinner with them right after work, and I said, sure, I could eat. And so we went to another restaurant and had dinner, and then myself and one of my friends at the time had to use the restroom. And as I'm in the restroom, I find that I'm bleeding quite a bit. And at 5 months into your pregnancy, that's very scary. And I just started crying uncontrollably. And my friend in the next stall, she heard me and she knew I was freaking out. And so all I remember is her banging on the stall door and asking, what's the matter? What's the matter? Let me in, let me in. I don't remember anything really after that until we were at the hospital. And we were checking in, I was checking in, and the lady at the registration desk was obtaining all the information from me, and she was handling it as if I had just become pregnant. And I didn't look like I was 5 months pregnant. I was very, very tiny, barely a little bulge in the lower part of my abdomen. And when I told her I was 21 weeks, she was, you need to get to triage immediately. And next thing you know, I'm upstairs in triage, and they got me all checked in, and I remember I had to go to the restroom. I was so afraid, and I could feel my baby kicking in an area that is not normal, and there's a lot of pressure. And I ended up going back and laying down, and they were going to put me on some medication. I can't remember the name of the medication, but it was to be able to stop contractions, and they started to lift my body up at an angle so that my head was down at the base of the bed, and then at the head of the bed, and then my feet were up at the foot of the bed. And they said that they may need to do that for several weeks. But before they did, the nurse was getting me all situated and did a physical exam, and she was pregnant, big old belly herself at the time, super friendly woman, and very calming for me. And James was there at this point, my husband. At the time we weren't married. And I will never forget the look on her face after she did the physical exam. It was a look of worry and concern and fear, and she just walked right out of the room. She didn't say anything. And prior to that, they had done an ultrasound. And that was when I and James found out that we were having a boy. We didn't know what we were having until that moment, and that was so exciting. But then when the nurse had done the physical exam and had that look of worry and rushed out of the room and didn't even say anything to me, I looked over at James and I said, "Something's wrong." And he says, "No, it's fine. It's fine." I said, "No, something's wrong." And he's like, "Okay." And then I don't know how long time had passed, but then my actual OBGYN had shown up, because this was probably 11 o'clock at night. And so he shows up to the hospital and he comes in and he's talking to me and he says, "Well, I would like to do a physical exam to see what the nurse is telling me, if it's true or not. So I just want to check to see where your cervix is at. However, if I do that, there's a chance that your water could break and the amniotic fluid won't be in there anymore, and there will be no chance but to deliver. And if we deliver, your son's lungs aren't developed enough that he wouldn't survive." And I said, "Well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. You're the doctor, so I think you should do whatever is best." So he did the physical exam, and sure enough, my water broke. And I didn't know how to think, how to feel in that moment. It was like this fog had just completely come over me. So the next thing you know, I'm on a gurney and they're transporting me into a labor and delivery room. And I remember just looking up at the ceiling as they're wheeling me into this other room and asking God, "Is this real? Is this really happening?" Definitely a dreamlike state. So we get into the labor and delivery room and get everything set up. And I'm having contractions, but it was a slow process. And I remember we were trying to call everybody. We tried calling my parents, his parents, extended family, to get a hold of somebody to let them know what was happening. And it was in the middle of the night. Nobody was awake. Not a lot of people there was no text messaging at that time. And so it just felt really scary. I felt alone, even though James was right there and the doctors were right there and the nurses were right there. I didn't know how to process it. So the night continues on, and the contractions are slow. And then I think it's just a slow, gradual leak of the amniotic fluid. But it was, because it was so slow and gradual, one of the nurses came in and said, "Well, I'm not sure that's what it really is the amniotic fluid." And so there was just like this moment of hope. And I remember just being like, "James, maybe I don't have to deliver. Maybe it'll be fine." And he's like, yeah. A few minutes later, it just gushes out. Confirmation that that's what it was. So they're preparing me. Finally, morning comes, and we get a hold of family, and they start showing up to the hospital. And there's only so many people that can come and see me at a time. I don't even remember. So, the contractions were getting slower, but they were concerned that I would come up with an infection if we didn't deliver sooner rather than later. So they ended up giving me Pitocin, which speeds up the contractions for labor and delivery. And as the contractions were increasing, I felt like it was manageable. It really wasn't that painful at that point. So they asked if I wanted an epidural for the pain, and I said no, it'll be fine. Well, by the time the contractions were really coming in harder and stronger, I wanted that epidural. And they said it's too late. At this point, it's too late. And I delivered him. And they warned me ahead of time that when I did deliver him, because his lungs aren't fully developed, that it may look like he's gasping for air because he's trying to breathe, and that he would probably live about an hour. It's crazy that it's been 21 and a half years and I can still recall these details. Anyway, so I delivered Jacob, and they put him into my arms, and he was so tiny, little tiny, beautiful boy. And that's what I ended up singing to him when I was holding him, and was beautiful, 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 beautiful boy. And he was opening his little mouth to try to gasp for air, but his poor little lungs weren't developed enough yet. And as a mother, watching their baby suffer, like trying to grasp and to breathe, and you want to give them that life, but I had no control over it. The crazy thing is he looked so peaceful. He was so peaceful. His eyes were able to open, so I don't know the color of his eyes. I couldn't really see into him. But I held him as long as I could. James was holding him when he took his last attempt at breathing. And he passed away peacefully in his daddy's arms. We were able to still hold him even after he had passed. Family was able to come in and meet him and say their goodbyes and their love for this beautiful, amazing little boy that didn't even get a chance to know them. But I felt him, and I did feel God. I felt angels. I felt the grief too. But I also felt the love, which was a lot stronger. When they had to finally take him, that was a challenge because they said that I would be able to see him again. But that, I know now that was the only way that I was able to give him over, was to know that at some point I would be able to have him in my arms again. Whew. It's been a while since I've thought about it in such a way as what I've just explained. And so I need a minute just to compose myself. But I'll be right back.
God has been preparing my life since before I was even born. There was a moment my life could have ended before it began, but God intervened. Through every move, every season, He was shaping what I would value as a wife and a mother. Even through loss, He taught me to slow down, pay attention, and live more aligned with Him. And now, I can see the fruit in my children, in the people in my life, in the light others say they feel. Not because I've done everything right, but because He has been faithful in preparing the ground. God didn't just plant you, He's been preparing you.
Thank you for coming back and giving me a little bit of a break. This time I got a tissue. So, needless to say, trying to figure out how to keep going after the loss of Jacob was a process, and it continues to be a process even to this day. The doctor didn't end up being the right kind of doctor. The events afterwards, I remember going to my follow-up appointment at his office, and the room was so crowded with pregnant women that were coming in for their checkups. This was, I think, 2 weeks after I had lost him. And that was painful. I was, hold on, sorry. I was by myself. James had to work. So that was difficult. And I had to wait in there forever. Well, first of all, when I checked in, the ladies at the front desk were so rude to me. And I told them that I had my follow-up appointment. And they're like, well, we don't see you on here. And I just started crying right there. And then they were like, oh, well, but we'll see if we can get you in. So then I had to sit in there. It felt like hours sitting in there watching people coming and going, and I'm just off and on crying in the middle. I'm just feeling all those feelings. Eventually I get back and I see the doctor. And one of the first things he says to me is we should use contraception. No bedside manner. I remember they got details on the death certificate wrong. There were other things that were going wrong. And then, thank God for my parents. They really stepped up and helped. They helped take care of the funeral expenses. We were able to live with them, James and I. For the first 3 months afterwards, I couldn't even work. First time since I've ever been able to work that I didn't work. Last time I've ever done that so far. Planning a funeral. The little casket. It was a little blue casket. Blue reminds me of him. I remember on the day of the funeral, we started out at the funeral home, and there was a pastor, and he was praying with everyone. And then we ended up going over to the gravesite, and the hole was already dug. And then they lowered his casket into the ground. And they asked if I would want to put the first bit of dirt on top. And I grabbed the dirt with my hands. And I threw it onto the casket. And I just screamed that I love him. And it took everything in me not to jump in that hole with him. Oh, that was painful. But I didn't. Whew. So, the days were really long after that. You really find out who your friends are when you go through something like that. Who's really there for you. Some people just, they don't understand. They don't know how to handle the pain, and then they act weird around you. They don't know how to talk, so they just avoid talking to you. That's the worst thing that you can do for anybody that's grieving. They already feel lonely. You don't even have to say anything. Just let them know that you're there. Don't get uncomfortable. It's not about you. It's about being there for somebody that's hurting. Just the mundane things that would come up, they weren't important anymore. You see life differently and how precious it truly is. Ugh. So the hospital had given me a blanket that I had wrapped up for Jacob. And my sister had bought me this little angel bear in the gift shop while I was at the hospital. And this bear, when I put him to show Jacob, even though he couldn't see it, was the exact same size that he was. And I have him. I have that bear. And that blanket. Here's the blanket. Here's the bear. This was the size of my baby. My little Jacob. And I remember in the hospital, I would swaddle him. And so my comfort was swaddling this bear for a while. I haven't done it in a long time, but when I'm really missing him, and I'm really, really grieving, because it comes in waves, but over time it does get easier. It does get easier, but the pain never goes away, ever. Don't tell people to get over it. There's no such thing as getting over grief. It's a lifelong thing. So I'd swaddle him, my little angel, little baby bear here. Just hold him. Man, I miss him. But I know that I will see him again in heaven someday. I know that. I know that with everything in me. Whew. Eventually, I needed to get back to work. I needed to still pay my bills. But it was hard. It was challenging to get back into a groove of some sort. I didn't know what direction I wanted to take. I ended up working for my grandmother. She had a real estate company, and I helped with the property management side for a few months. But it wasn't where I was supposed to be. I was still trying to figure that out. And I really leaned into my Bible. My aunt had given me a Bible right after Jacob had passed. The 7 days to be exact. It's listed in the date. It says Serendipity Bible, but that is just the name of this because it's a study. It's a small group for personal and small group studies. It's the NIV version. And so it was able to help give me a little bit more prompting when I would study in it. And to be honest with you, after his loss was the very first time I really read my Bible. My mom had given me a Bible when I was younger, but I never really read it. I would take it to Awanas when I would do Awanas, and we would memorize scripture, but I didn't really understand what I was reading. And I just knew that I needed to cling on to his word. I even have, because I had worked for Applebee's at the time that I was working in the restaurants. And I still have a little Applebee's like server notes when you take somebody's order. It's still in my Bible. And this was 20 something years ago. And I have a list of things when I would go to the cemetery to have my time. It says a picture of Jacob, because I have pictures of him from the hospital, his blanket, my Bible, the bear, a bunny, I don't know what the bunny was, water, flowers, just, a list of things to go. And I just have kept it in here as a reminder that this helped me. It helped me get through some really difficult times. I'm so thankful for God's word and his promises. So thankful. And when I am intentional and consistent with my walk with Christ and having those conversations with Him and trusting Him and surrendering, it's a beautiful thing. It's a powerful thing. It's a personal thing. It's not one size fits all. Because we're not one size fits all. So I'm very thankful. And knowing the people that weren't awkward or weird or didn't ignore me, or those people who were in my life at the time that would just talk to me or listen to me, I love you. Thank you for doing that. You really helped me. So after a while of just really sulking in all the things that had gone wrong, I remember vividly laying on the couch, and my dad said some strong words to me that was basically like, I can't remember right now exactly what he said, but it was like to just don't focus on all the things that went wrong, but just keep going. And at the time, I can't remember right now exactly what he had said, but it was like I took offense to it. But then I thought about it, and that wasn't a place, he wasn't being mean. He was coming from a place of love and really wanting his daughter, his baby girl, to not be suffering. And I've learned that suffering is a choice. It's a mental choice to suffer. You'll hear stories of people who were in the most horrific conditions, such as concentration camps back in Germany. And they had the most awful things happening to them. But they chose mentally not to suffer. They chose hope. They chose to still have joy in the midst of such darkness. It's a choice. I've learned that. It's not easy. You have to be intentional. You have to teach yourself. Every day you're becoming stronger and stronger every day. Let that sit with you. What are the moments that you've suffered in your own mind? Or maybe, what are the moments that you chose that you weren't going to do that? You weren't going to allow that to happen. Think about that. And as you're thinking, I'm going to take another break. But we'll come back. And we'll just talk about or think about next steps after such pain, after such grief. Where's the light at the end of it? I'll see you in a minute. Thank you so much for coming back and remaining in this journey with me, in this story. It is not easy being this vulnerable. However, I know there's people out there that could be helped by just sharing my story. That's the sole intention and purpose behind Into the Garden We Grow's TV show, is to be able to share these stories and help people on their journey in whatever season of life that they're in, whatever challenges, whatever successes, all of it. What's their journey? Can they relate to our journey? I think that's how people heal. That's how people grow. That's how people find community. And that's the sole intention and purpose of it. I was thinking about the next season, the next stage. What did we do next after losing Jacob? And I never, ever once blamed God. Ever. And I know that I felt like he was there the entire time. He was right there. And I was able to take a look at my life and what direction it was headed. And it wasn't headed in the direction that I knew that I wanted. And James too. We knew that we needed to change because we didn't want Jacob's name to be forgotten or the pain of the loss not used for good, the power of good. And that good for us personally was to do things differently. We weren't ready to raise him, not in a way that we would want to have. I would have never changed, don't get me wrong, I wouldn't change anything to have him back in my life. Like, for him to be alive, I would want that so bad. But I know that can't happen. I know that that's not possible. So how do we move forward? Not forgotten, but make something beautiful out of something so painful. We got engaged. We got married. We bought our first home right after that. I got my butt back into school. I went after my dreams, whatever that may have been, investing in myself to provide a future, because I knew I still wanted to be a mom. More than anything, I wanted to be a mom. And I felt like it was a new chance to do things differently. I was not going to stay in suffering. I gave myself the time that I needed to do what I needed to do, to be who I needed to be. Wow, how beautiful. And after we got married and we had our home and I finished my associate's degree, I was ready to try for another baby. And we got pregnant not too long after trying. Right when I was wrapping up my last class of my associate's degree, I found out that I was having a baby and took the test. I think it was on Christmas Eve, the night before Christmas. I was already thinking that I was on a trip to see my best friend up in Washington at the time. She was living there and she was pregnant. I was there to help her. I put on a baby shower for her in the middle of a winter storm. And I remember I was craving things and smelling things, and she's like, "How do you smell that, Kristen?" And then I started crying at a commercial. She goes, "You're pregnant." And I was like, I might be. And but I didn't want to take the test until I was home with James. And so we found out on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. Again, I can't remember which one it was, but so amazing, so joyful. But we had seen a specialist beforehand just to see, understand what are the steps for my body to be able to have another baby. Because what had happened is they classified at the time my cervix was incompetent, which just means weak. I think they've changed the language since then. And so when a woman gets pregnant, they have a cervix that closes tightly so that it holds the baby in until the duration of the pregnancy. Well, with mine, because it was weak and you don't know it until it actually happens, once Jacob started having weight, my cervix started opening. And so that's what happened. But there's interventions that you can do medically to carry the baby. And that's what I had to figure out, if that's what I needed to do. And but because it wasn't the same doctor, there's no way they would have been the same doctor. Come to find out, that previous doctor had a lot of bad things on his record, and I didn't know that because he was referred to me by a family member. And I think he ended up losing his license several years after I had lost Jacob. But anyway, enough about him. We went to the specialist and they told me that I would need to go do weekly transvaginal ultrasounds and, not only see my normal OBGYN, but work with a specialist. And I was on bed rest the entire time because we didn't know. And what we were looking for was funneling in the cervix, which in an ultrasound, if the baby's in there, the cervix is tight and they're in there. And the funneling is like it's starting to open like a funnel, right? And and I would go, and my female specialist was very helpful, and she would say, okay, this is what we're looking for, and she would be very specific with me, and everything looked great until I was 21, 22 weeks. Almost, I was going into 22 weeks pregnancy, and it was not her, it was this man that I'd never known before, but he was in her absence, and he had said, oh yeah, I'm starting to see a little bit of funneling here, but you just need to go home and do some bed rest. And I'm like, no. I've been on bed rest the entire time. This is exactly what we're looking for. And he goes, oh, I've written books about this, and, da-da-da-da-da, you'll be fine, blah, 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 blah. And I said, you are not a woman. You don't know what it's like. You don't know your body. Like, this is what we've been looking for. I am not losing another baby. So you are going to admit me in this hospital right now, and I'm not leaving until I get the stitch, it's called a cerclage, added into my cervix. And he knew I was serious. And sure enough, that shut him up, and I got motion, and I ended up getting admitted to the hospital. And the surgeon did a beautiful job, because that was the cutoff point. Beyond the 22 weeks, you can't get it. It's too risky. And I stood up. I was not going to lose another baby. This was the process that I was going to follow, and I'm going to be an advocate this time. I've learned. I'm not going to make the same mistake twice. And that's exactly what happened. And I had to remain on bed rest, and then we ended up going in at 36 weeks to have the stitch removed in my OBGYN's office. It was just supposed to be an outpatient procedure that was supposed to take only 2 minutes. Think about a pap smear. Yeah, it took 20 minutes, and it was not a good experience. And but we got it out. Finally, my OBGYN was like, I'm so sorry, but that knot was so good. That baby wasn't going anywhere. And so then they just monitored me, because they thought, well, as soon as we take the stitch out, your cervix is probably just going to open up and you're going to have a baby. That's not what happened. I was fine. I was walking around. Nothing was happening. And then once you're towards the end like that and you have that many more weeks, you're going in weekly to get checked again. And so at 37 weeks, went in, and I had high blood pressure. The cervix was still great. It was still tight and closed, but my blood pressure was really high, and I was diagnosed with preeclampsia. And the only way to get rid of that is to deliver the baby. So they admitted me to the hospital, put me on the Pitocin, induced the labor. It took a long time. We didn't know what we were having. I didn't want to know the gender. I wanted it to be a surprise because I just didn't, based on the experience with Jacob and finding out his gender. And so then I pushed for 2 hours, and that epidural wore off. It was very painful. And finally, I delivered my beautiful baby girl, Olivia, and she had this full head of hair. I was in so much pain, but I was so overwhelmed with joy and gratitude, and I just started bawling because I was just so happy to finally be a mom. And I worked so hard to have her. Oh, she's my rainbow baby. She is. And then 5 years after that, after my bachelor's degree, I wanted to have another baby. And that pregnancy, I knew early on that it was my cervix. So at 13 weeks, right after the first trimester, I had another cerclage, but this time I ended up getting a spinal headache because when they did the spine tap for the numbing, it nicked the fluid. And I remember that was a whole nother journey. I ended up with gestational diabetes. And so that I had to really monitor my diet, and I was still on bed rest most of the time with Emily, my other baby girl, and she's my beautiful brown-eyed girl. So I have 2 beautiful, incredibly amazing daughters, but my pregnancies were so difficult that after Emily, I knew that I was done, and I did have a double tube ligation. And again, this was just a pattern of me now advocating for myself and my health and the journey. And as I'm entering into this perimenopause stage of my life, there's a foundation now. I'm comfortable with being an advocate for myself and knowing what's right for me and what's not right for me. And I encourage that for anyone, not just females, but males. Knowing yourself, being an advocate for your own health, and what do you want? It's your life, it's your body. Thank you all for all of you who are watching this. And again, my hope and my prayer is that my testimony helps somebody. And maybe it encourages you to share your testimony to help somebody. Even if it's just one person, it is worth it. God's not done with you. He's got a lot of plans to work through you, and it's for His glory. And one day, I know that we will all be together in heaven with our loved ones, but the one who loves us more than anyone ever could, Jesus. Thank you again, and we will see you next week. Mwah. If something from today's conversation spoke to your heart, we invite you to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for being part of this community. Until next time, friends, we'll meet you here in the garden, growing together.